Hello, welcome to Jessie at Home. In this video I'm going to show you how to make these little star coasters. They are made using the Entrelac method for knitting in a garter stitch. As you can see, I have two made already. This one still needs its ends woven in. They are made using Lion Brand Kitchen Cotton. These samples are using the color Vanilla. I also happen to have the color Blueberry and the color Hot Pepper right here because I'm making a variety of red, white, and blue items right now to get ready for the 4th of July. And this Lion Brand Kitchen Cotton that's 100% cotton is great for if you're having a barbecue or something because it is, you know, 100% cotton. It's washable. It wicks up moisture if you're using it for something like a coaster. So let's take a look at these coasters real quick and talk about them. They are, like I said, made using the Entrelac method. There's actually 5 points, and you'll see when we make it, it's really nothing to be scared of. Okay, I made this first one pretty quickly, and then I did a little alteration at the center of the second one because when I made the first one I found I had to sew it together in the center to fill up the hole. I figured out what I could do to make it a little bit better for the second one, and I'll tell you that trick when we get to there. Okay, and like I said, I'm going to use the blue for our sample today because I think it'll show up against my white background a little better. Red usually looks a little weird on camera, and white against white can be a little hard to see. So we're going to go with the blue, and we are using a US 8, which is a 5mm knitting needle. You can certainly use straight needles. I just happen to use circulars for just about everything. But there is no reason why you can't use straight needles for this. You do not need circulars. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, here we are ready to begin the first point of our star coaster. And to begin, you need to cast on 7 stitches. So cast them on in whatever manner you prefer to cast on. It's really how you cast on isn't that important for these as long as you get 7 stitches on there. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I probably could have left myself a little longer tail, but I can still weave that in. I usually end up leaving a tail that's way too long or way too short. That one's a little on the short side. But life goes on. Okay, so we have cast on 7. And we have turned, and now we're ready to work row 1. And actually, row 1 through row 14 are all the same. And row 15 is almost the same. We're going to knit across. Okay, so just knit all the way across every single stitch. This is row 1. Knit across, and my cast on is almost always a little tight when I use cotton. Okay, and turn. And that's row 1. It's also row 2, 3, all the way through 14. Knit across, turn. Row 15 is a little different. Knit across, don't turn. Alright, so this first point is very easy. We cast on 7 and we knit for 15 rows. At the end of row 15, we do not turn our work. So I just did row 1 here. I'm going to do the next 14 rows, and meet me back here after you have your 15 rows of knitting. Do not turn after the last row, and we will start on our second point. I have completed the first point. So I cast on 5 and I knit across for 15 rows. I completed row 15 and I have not turned. So that means I'm now ready to begin my second point. For the second point, we're going to place a marker. Now these 7 stitches that are on our needle right now, we are going to ignore until we get to the last point. Until we get to the 5th point, we are going to ignore these 7 stitches. They're just going to hang out here. Okay, and so this marker is just going to remind us where those stitches are, and we're not going to worry about them from here on out until we get to the end. The next thing we need to do is pick up 7 stitches evenly along the side and knit into each. So you can see when it says to pick up stitches evenly along the side here, since here is the point of our work, we were told not to turn, you know that means this is the side you're picking up those 7 stitches from. And if you look at this and you look at these little bumps here, we can count those. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of these little bumps, these little sets of ridges. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's safe to say that if we pick up 1 stitch on the side of each of these ridges, we will have 7 stitches that we've picked up and knit into. Some people will pick up all 7 stitches and knit into them. I personally, when it's, it's not that big and it's just pretty easy to figure out which one comes next, I just pick them up one at a time. But either way is perfectly acceptable. So I'm going to just grab one of these little loops at the edge of this ridge, and I'm going to knit into it without catching my stitch marker. Knit. That's 1. Now I go to the next ridge and I pick up a loop and I knit into it. 2. Next ridge, pick up a loop. Maybe. I split the yarn. It's always the hardest part, picking up stitches. Knit into it. 3. Next ridge, pick up a loop. 4. Next ridge, pick up a loop. 5. Next, pick up a loop. 6. And the last little ridge, we're going to pick up a loop, knit into it, and 7. Now whenever I've picked up stitches, I like to, when I'm done, go back and count to make sure I didn't make any mistakes. Here is our marker. There should be 7 stitches after that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I know I have all of the 7 stitches I was supposed to pick up. And now the instructions say to turn. Row 1 was pick up 7 stitches evenly along the side of the piece and knit into each, then turn. So now we're at the turn point. Now, rows 2 through 13 are all the same. They are knit 7 and turn. Okay, so let's take a look at that real quick. We're going to knit 7. And if you happen to be doing this in front of the TV or while you're having a conversation with somebody, you don't actually have to count the 7 stitches that you're knitting, because you just added on 7 stitches after the marker, so you know when you get to the marker, you stop. That's all. Just stop when you get to the marker. And that was row 2. And now we're going to turn, and row 3 is the same. It's knit 7. Well, you know you have 7 stitches here, so you're just going to knit to the end for row 3, right? So that was row 2 and row 3. Basically, you're just knitting these 7 stitches that are the stitches on one side of the marker. You're just knitting them back and forth until you've completed 13 rows. Okay, row 1 was when you picked them up and knit into them, and then we just did row 2 and row 3. We're going to keep going until you have 13 rows completed, and this time you are turning at the end of the 13th row. And I know that last time we did 15 rows and this time we're doing 13 rows, and it just seems all wrong, but in the end it's going to look fine. Don't worry about it. Keep going until you've completed 13 rows, and then we'll come back and we'll finish off point number 2. We have completed row 13 of the second point, and now it's time to do the bind off for the second point. So what we're doing is we're going to bind off until there's just 1 stitch left. There'll be 1 stitch left on our right needle. So we're binding off all of these, which will leave 1 stitch on the right needle, and then we'll still have these 7 stitches that we're ignoring on our left needle. So bind off just your normal way, which is knit 2, pass this first stitch over, knit another one, pass the stitch over, knit another one, pass the right hand stitch over, knit. And you don't really have to count because you're just going to keep going until everything next to the everything on the right side of the marker has been cast off or bound off, and what you have left is the 1 stitch on your right hand needle and the 7 stitches on your left hand needle. So that's where we are right now, and that is the completion of our second point. Now it's time to begin our third point, and our third and fourth points are actually made the same, but I'm still going to show them both to you. So for the third point, we still have the 1 stitch on our right hand needle from the end of the second point. Alright, and we need to get back to 7 stitches. So we're going to pick up 6 more stitches along this edge here. Okay, now if you count these little ridges again like we did before, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And this is where at the very beginning, remember I told you on the first coaster I made, I ended up having to sew the center together. This is the first coaster that I made, and I had to weave the ends all the way back down to the center and kind of sew the center together so that I didn't have a little hole. And that was because I chose to use the first 6 of these 7 bumps, thinking that this was okay. It was just the center. It was fine if I didn't use that one. But it did matter. It left a hole in the center. So what I have been doing since then, and you can see in this one, I have not sewn the center together at all. And you see how it's nice and closed? The reason it's like that is because I use this stitch on up. I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and pick up 1 stitch from the edge of each of those 6 ridges. I just ignore this ridge altogether. Alright, and my theory on that is it just kind of pulls in this little divot a little bit more anyway. If I skip that first ridge, it's just going to help pull in that divot and define my star a little bit so it's closer to a star. Okay, it's got more of, you can of course steam this to make the points really pointy and pull the insides, pull the divots really in. But by skipping that first one, it helps create that little divot that's right here. And it also keeps you from having a hole in the center here. So that means we're going to pick up a stitch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we're going to ignore the first ridge. So here we go. Let's do that. We're going to pick up and knit into 6 stitches, because there's already 1 on our needle. And that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then number 6 is right here in the center. And this is going to really keep that center nice and closed for us. 6. So we have picked up and knit into 6 stitches. Here we've come to the marker. There was already 1 stitch on here, which means we should have 7 stitches total on our right hand needle. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we have done everything correctly. Now we are going to turn, and then we are going to, for rows 2 through 14, knit 7 and turn. Again, the row count has changed. Trust me, it's all good. Rows 2 through 14, we are going to knit 7 and turn. We just completed row 1, so I'll show you row 2 here, and then we'll meet at the end. So row 2 is just knit 7, which is going to be knitting all the way to the end of the row. Okay, so we're just going to knit 7, knit all the way up to the end without dropping things, and turn. And then row 3 is the same. You're going to knit 7 and turn, and that means you can just basically knit to the you can just knit to the marker. You don't actually have to count. Right, so keep going. Knit 7, turn all the way to the end of row 14. Okay, remember, and you do actually turn at the end of row 14. And then we will meet back here to finish off our third point. We've completed row 14 of our third point on this star coaster, and we are turning at the end of row 14. And now this row, this point ends the same way as our second point ends, where we're going to bind off those stitches until there's just one stitch left on our right hand needle. One stitch left on a right hand needle and 7 stitches on the left hand needle, the 7 stitches that we're ignoring. So we're binding off all of these stitches that we are not ignoring. So we knit 2, we pass the right hand stitch over, knit another one, pass the right hand stitch over, keep going, knit another one, pass the right hand stitch over. Going to keep going until we've managed to get those 7 stitches over to the right hand needle and bound off so that there's just the 1 stitch left on the right hand needle. Some people will call this binding off 7, some people will call this binding off 6. Alright, you might call it binding off 7 because you bound off all those 7 stitches, right? But there's still 1 left, which means that you really bound off 6 because you went down from 7 to 1, so that's binding off 6. I don't really know which one's right, perfectly honest. So you're just binding off everything on this side of the marker so that there's 1 stitch left on your right hand needle and 7 stitches left on your left hand needle, and you call it whatever you want. As long as this is what you end up with, I'm happy. Alright, so now we are going to, now we've completed our third point. And you can see right now what it looks like is it really looks like we have 3/4 of a square, not so much 3/5 of a star, but if you stretch it out you can see that it is kind of 3/5 of a star is what we have right now. And we are ready to begin our fourth point. Here we are, ready to begin our fourth point, and our fourth point is made exactly the same as the third point. So we're just going to go through it again without, oopsie, a whole lot of explanation because I explained it all when we did the third point. So again, we have to pick up these 6 stitches, and again we're going to start counting from the very bottom ridge, and we're not going to worry about this top one because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 ridges. We only need to pick up 6 stitches. We're going to skip the first ridge to make that little divot and pick up a stitch from these 6 ridges over here. So we are going to pick up our 6 stitches and knit into them. Pick up and knit into those 6 stitches, and that will be the end of row 1. So that's 1 and 2 and 3 4 5 kind of, sort of, maybe. Come on, play nice. That's so not whatever. It doesn't really matter if it's not what I was going for. I got it. I got something. I'm happy. Make sure I don't split it. Right? Then again, maybe not. Let's see. And I did split it. Yeah, see? I only pretend like I know what I'm doing over here. Alright, there we go. We picked up 6 stitches, and we had 1 to begin with, which should give us 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 7 stitches on our right hand needle, and we are now going to continue. That was row 1. We are going to continue with our fourth point by turning the end of row 1, and now for rows 2 through 14 we are going to knit 7 stitches and then turn. So this is row 2. As I fall off the side of your screen, I'm working on that. I know I have a habit of falling off the screen. I'm trying really hard not to do that. Alright, so that's the end of row 2. You're going to complete rows 3 through 14 the same way. Knit 7, turn, knit 7, turn. We're going to come back at the end of row 14 and finish this off, and then we'll be ready to start our 5th point. And here we are closing in on the end of our 4th point. We have completed row 14 and turned, and we are now ready to do the bind off. So same as before. All right, we're just going to bind off these stitches so that the last one is still left on our right hand needle. So let's just go ahead and do the bind off, and then we'll be ready to start point 5. Yay! Almost done. Point 5 is kind of fun and exciting because of the how you join it together with the you join it as you make it, so that there's no seaming or grafting or any of that sort of stuff. It's when you're done, all you have to do is weave in the 2 ends, which is awesome. I love things like that. Only 2 ends to weave in and no seaming. Rock on. All right, so here we go. Oh my gosh, did I just prove my age by saying that? So the 80s will never be gone. Here we are with 4 of our 5 points completed. We have 1 stitch still left on our right hand needle, and we still have those 7 stitches we had been ignoring on our left hand needle. That is the end of our 4th point. We are ready to begin point 5. Okay, for our 5th and final point, yay! The first thing we want to do is remove this marker. No more, yay! We are no longer ignoring these 7 stitches. They are going to become very important here. So, let's get going. To begin, we are going to start this point the same way we started points 3 and 4. We're going to pick up 6 more stitches. Okay, so we're going to pick up these 6 stitches just as before. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we're going to ignore this one. So let's go ahead and pick up those 6 stitches to get us really going. Okay, we pick up and knit into 6 stitches along the side. This is how row 1 begins. That's 1. Oh, and look at that. Did you see what I just did? I picked it up from the first ridge. We were supposed to ignore that first ridge. Alright, so we're going to try that again. Here we go. And I split my yarn and all sorts of craziness. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh my goodness. It's so easy when there's not a camera going. 5. And the very last one. 6. Okay. Now we have pick up 6 stitches evenly alongside of point just made and knit into each. Slip 1 stitch from left needle onto right needle, pass last knitted stitch over slipped stitch and turn. Okay, so what that means is you're going to put this stitch over here, whoop, and then we're going to pass this stitch over. Whoop. And now we still have 7 stitches on this side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? That's all. It's a lot quicker to do than to say. Now we're going to turn. Now rows 2 through 14 even are the same. Our even rows are always just knit 7 and turn. Okay, it's the odd rows that are different. So knit 7, which is going to be knit to the end. Okay, so you can count your 7 stitches, but as long as you haven't made any mistakes, 7 stitches is going to be knit to the end, and if it's not, then you need to figure out where you went awry. Rows 3 through 15 odd are knit 6, knit 2 together, and turn. So on our odd stitches, we're going to knit 6, 1, 2, I'm sorry, on our odd rows, we're knitting 6, 3, 4, 5, 6, and now we're going to knit 2 together. So pick up, instead of just knitting into 1, you just go over and knit into 2. That's all. There's nothing fancy about a knit 2 together. It's done exactly the same as if you were knitting 1, only you go into 2 instead. You don't change directions of anything. All right, that's all. There we go. Now we have 7 over here again. Now we're going to turn and knit to the end. Okay, we're going to keep on doing that. I'll do it again, and we'll kind of fast forward to the end. Turn. I'll show you that knit 6 again. Knit 6 and then knit 2 together. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and now we're going to knit 2 together, which makes our 7th stitch. Okay, and then turn and knit 7. Keep doing that until you get to the end. Okay, we'll come back here at like row 15, okay? Here we are, ready for row 15, or the last row of our 5-point star, okay, of point 5 of our 5-point star. So, to do row 15, what we're actually going to do is we're just going to go ahead and complete it like we had completed the other rows, the other odd rows. We're going to knit 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then knit 2 together, which happen to be our last 2. Okay, and that is the end of point 5. All that we have to do now is bind off. Maybe if I can pick up my knitting needle, then I can bind off. You'd think when they're attached they'd be hard to lose, right? Okay, so just bind off. Okay, and we're just going to keep going all the way to the end. And as you know, when you finish a bind off, even if you bind off everything, when you finish the bind off, there's still 1 loop left on your needle. Ta-da! And to get rid of that, you just pull the end through. Alright, and then you can fix things up with your weaving in of your ends. Now there is one other option you could have done. On row 15, you could actually bind off while you're working row 15. Okay, this is, from this side, the star looks just fine, but from the other side, it does look a little odd right here. You can always try binding off row 15 and see what you think about that look. It's just a different way of doing basically the same pattern. This just happens to be the way that I wrote it down this time. Maybe next time on my next pattern where I use a star, I might try it the other way, and then you all can just decide which version you happen to like. Either one is acceptable. Alright, so you can either do it like I've written, or you can bind off while you make row 15 instead of after row 15. Alright, there you have it. I hope you have enjoyed the star pattern. Oh, I did want to tell you, I keep forgetting to mention, another use for this coaster, and one of the things I'm doing, which is why I'm making it in all 3 of these colors as opposed to in just the white or just the blue or whatever. I'm making it in the red, white, and blue. Yes, I want the multicolored coasters, but also I'm going to make several of each, and I'm going to string them together to make some bunting to hang up around the little easy up that I have out in my backyard for when we have a picnic. Right? So there you go. I hope you have found this helpful. Go out and make some stars. Have a nice day.